So firstly, as Mike said, it's almost going on 7 years now that we've been partners. And I think I'm real excited to talk about what we're doing now and why. So what I'm going to do today is talk a little bit about what we view as the power of eGain. I'm going to take a step back then and talk a little bit about Cisco in the contact center market. We've been in the market for going on 15 years, believe it or not. Not everyone would know that, but I want to give you a sense of what we've done, where we're at today, and then really the bulk of this is why did we change our relationship with eGain and move from just an OEM relationship to a value-added reselling relationship, which I think is very important. So this is nothing new, and you've probably seen this before, but customer behavior is absolutely changing. Demands are changing, and although it's clearly has been changing for quite a while around retail, I think we would all submit that it's changing around a lot of other verticals as well. Certainly financial services, insurance, banking, healthcare. Healthcare is really exploding right now, obviously with the Affordable Care Act and all the other sort of ecosystem players in that market right now. We're seeing just tremendous interest and tremendous requirements and demands in the healthcare market. So just a couple of points. You've probably seen these before, 51% research online and then buy in the store, right? This is from Google. 32% reach online, visit a store. I'm sure many of you do this, right? Particularly if you're buying a high-end product or a high-end electronic or what have you, and then you end up buying online, but you want to sort of touch and feel and get to compare all the different possibilities before you actually make that jump. Multi-channel customers, interestingly enough, if we use that term, spend 82% more than single-channel customers, which is interesting. So we're going to talk a lot more about customer dynamics and about what we see as sort of an evolution in the sort of overall contact center and customer care space, which sort of plays to this around what customers now expect. And if you provide them the right kind of service, I think you reap the rewards. 84% want consistent service. I'm sure we all would like this. And I'm sure we all experience a lot of fragmentation. And I think at the end of the day, this is really one of the things that eGain does really well is try to help customers connect their journeys, right? And not create such fragmentation. Just from a Cisco perspective overall, important to note, and this has changed quite a bit over the last couple of years, and I've been in this market for 25 plus years, and remember the very first, in the late 90s, the first sort of email response and web chat systems and so forth, the first bridging of the internet and e-commerce with contact centers. 75% of our RFPs that we get for net new contact centers require some level of multi-channel. We're going to talk about sort of a stratification of multi-channel, but 75%, and I would say that 50% or so are executing on that. So that's a pretty big deal. Now here's the challenge, right? This is what we continue to see in the market, and part of the reason we see it is because to really do an effective job, as we heard Tracy talking about and we heard some of the other speakers talk about throughout the last day, really requires a well thought out plan. And it requires sort of a phasing in order to execute a holistic customer engagement platform. And what often happens is people don't have the time or energy, or they don't trust their IT organization or their shared service organization to actually be able to execute that. And so what happens is they have to go solve a problem, right? And I'm sure you all experience this, right? And maybe sometimes you have to do this yourself. But they go out and they select something to solve a specific problem. But if you're a large company and you do this, you end up getting something that looks a lot like this. And it becomes very difficult to deal with brand management. It becomes very difficult to connect one line of business to another line of business. If you're trying to cross-sell and upsell, you create seams, and you create a disconnected journey. So what we would submit again, you'll hear this from us, one of the reasons why we've re-upped our relationship with eGain is because point solutions in this space and tactical fixes create what this chart shows, which is really chaos. And what we like to call this is doing the wrong things right, right? So great intentions, you try to go out and execute, and then you end up with just a mess. And arguably something that may be worse than if you hadn't done anything to begin with. So again, what I think I'm really impressed with eGain on, and again, we've had a long journey. We've learned a lot from eGain. I think eGain's learned a lot from us, and that's what makes a good partnership, because we all can learn to do things better. But this whole notion of creating a smart, connected journey across these digital touch points, I think is pretty powerful. This you might have seen in the past. This is an eGain chart where a mom, right, who's pretty savvy, has a good network, talks to her, friends and family about the need for an insurance policy, collects a lot of, information, and goes out and purchases an insurance policy. And then, unfortunately, why you have insurance is because sometimes you need insurance, has a situation where she needs to actually leverage that insurance and create a claim and so forth. And what eGain does a really nice job of is, creating this opportunity to create a connectedness between all these different steps, between researching, between buying, between using, and then even the full circle. We heard about the crowdsourcing and the whole social, the ability to sort of tell friends and family. So I'm just giving you one example, right? eGain Community for this notion of research to help customers create forums. Co-browse, we heard the announcement yesterday, the ability to get help with filling out forums and making things a little bit more expeditious because, particularly for some industries, more so than others, some of the forms and things that need to be done in order to buy are pretty cumbersome, and not everyone really understands that. So the ability to get an expert and be able to help somebody through that process. And then when you actually have to use the ability to get self-service, we're going to talk more about self-service versus assisted service, because Cisco grew up in the sort of voice contact center space. And that's, we've always had this notion of voice self-service and voice assisted service. And the same things hold for many of the other digital channels, whether it be web, mobile, visual, et cetera. Super Chat, I know, is out in the, if you haven't had a chance to look at that, take a look at that. And then again, the ability to use the social for putting a status, sending out a tweet, updating Facebook, et cetera. So really powerful connectedness across these multi-channel customer journeys. So with that context and that sort of acknowledgement of what we like and what we see in eGain and what our customers like about it, and our partners too, who happen to be in the audience as well, let me give you a little bit of history about Cisco in the contact center market. So we have this thing, some of you might have heard, we call it the waves of sort of contact center innovation. And there are effectively 3 of them. So if you go back 40 some odd years and you look at the history of contact centers, wave 1 back in the early 80s was all about the cost, right? It was about how do I handle this unbelievable amount of call volume. This is well before the internet and e-commerce and so forth. How do I handle this unbelievable amount of call volume in a predictable, cost-effective, systematic way, right? And this was really where the advent of the automatic call distributor, the ACD, came out, and operational metrics like average speed of answer and abandon and service level adherence all came on the scene. A very important time in the overall contact center market if you look at it holistically. In the mid-90s, the second wave emerged, which was really around the advent of CRM systems, the first CRM systems. And this was really about relationships. It was where there was a set of industries, customers that said, you know what, we do need to deal with throughput and cost control, But we recognize, the famous 80-20 rule, right? 80% of our profits come from 20% of our customers. And so we can't just treat every customer the same. We have to start looking at them differently. And we have to start building a segmentation model and a differentiated service model and handle those customers that are more meaningful and more powerful and are more important to our bottom line. We have to handle them differently. It's not to say that we don't like the other customers, but we need to create a differentiated service strategy. And interestingly enough, this is where Cisco got into the contact center market. In '98, we bought a company called Geotel, a very small Boston-based company, who had really two main things that Geotel was focused on. One was this notion of, on the cost side of the equation, virtualizing call centers. So back in the day, you needed a call center, you found a location, you built a call center. If you had to grow, you found another location, you built another call center. And what Geotel did well is virtualize, create Erlang efficiencies, right? Bring these pools of people together to create more cost efficiencies. Basically, across multiple instances of call centers. The other thing that Geotel was doing, interestingly enough, at that time, because Geotel had this notion of being able to deal with multiple platforms, multiple PBXs and ACDs and IVR systems and so forth, Geotel started building a sort of a CTI middleware framework for taking data and information from back-end systems like CRM systems and again applying this notion of relationship to it. So starting to help customers segment their customers and create differentiated service. That's when Cisco got into the market to begin with by purchasing that, which was really an extensible and very open framework. Fast forward a few years, and in about 2002, we created the first IP contact center and went to market with the first IP contact center solution. What was interesting about that is obviously that was after the .com bust, so e-commerce was moving ahead quickly. But Cisco was really a pioneer in IP telephony or voice over IP. This notion of converging networks together and being able to get cost control and sort of break the time and distance barrier. Well, at the same time, there were some smart people at Cisco that said, we can really leverage this for customer care and call centers. We can start taking what we were doing before, which was virtualizing multiple call centers, which had the full stack, typically in switch rooms, virtualizing them. We can now really break time and distance by using things like voice over IP technology and basically taking it to the next level of efficiency. We can bring those together. And there was real value in doing so. And that's kind of when we first entered the real contact center market in terms of selling to the call center buyer, if you will. If you move forward, it took us about 4 or 5 years to get real traction. And in around 2007, we finally were, Gartner put us in the contact center leaders, in the Magic Quadrant, in the leaders quadrant, right? That's the place you want to be, right? If you're a vendor selling technology solutions. So we had finally made it into the sort of leaders quadrant in the 2007 timeframe. So it took us a number of years. Interestingly enough, and I'm going to talk about what's happened over the last couple of years, but in 2009, we actually had made such progress that we sort of became the number 2 market share player in terms of contact centers, according to Gartner and other industry analysts. Now, we were sort of on the cusp between 2 and 3, and I'll show you a chart in a minute. But we had come a long way, and we had really started to see market adoption and customer adoption, which was critical. Interestingly enough, around that same time, or we would say around the 2010 timeframe, the next wave of contact center innovation was sort of born. And this was the wave where we shifted from just relationship and this notion of differentiated service to starting to treat customers as a holistic entity, right? The entire customer experience, or what we might say is customer engagement. So starting to look at customers holistically, whether they walked into your bricks and mortar, whether they went to your website, whether they called into the contact center, whether they sent you an email, And the other things, the shift from, and we heard it this morning, from just this reactive care to much more of a proactive care, right? And we would suggest that this is the wave that we've been in for a couple of years now, but it's ever emerging, right? And this is where digital channels and the power of an eGain platform really can augment what we're doing at Cisco, which I'll show you in a minute, which we believe really creates differentiated value for our customers. So if you look at what's happened over the last 3 or 4 years since we sort of got to the cusp of number 2, is there's obviously been a lot of industry consolidation. We have we're on the cusp, we're on the verge, as our friends in marketing say, we're on the verge of becoming number 1 in market share. Now this is the 2012 data from back in March of this year for last year. And you could see that we're about less than 3 points from the market leader Avaya, who's been the market leader for many, many years. And we believe if we look at the trend over the last couple of quarters, hopefully by next March or April when this data comes out, that we'll have finally got to the number 1 market share position. And frankly, we think that some of our decisions around partnering have certainly helped us, not to mention the economic situation and the situation with just the viability of companies. And this is an investment that you want to make for 10 plus years. So we've been very fortunate in terms of our market adoption. At the same time as these sort of waves have been happening around buyers, requirements changing, and so forth, there's been an architectural evolution across these same waves, right? So if you look back at the cost wave, way back, right, it was all about the notion of an ACD. I mentioned that before. It was about big appliances. It was about building call centers, the walled garden, right? You build a call center, you put an ACD and all the systems in a switch room, and you ran your call center. If you need another one, you duplicated it, right? That was fine back then. It served us well. When we went to relationships and we looked at CRM systems, the architecture had a shift. Contact centers became a system. They became a set of systems working in concert together. And CTI was really the middleware, the glueware that tied all these systems together. And as I mentioned, that's kind of where Cisco was born, sort of in this wave. And as it turns out, it served us well, because if we look at the experience wave and what we've been working on over the last 5 or so years, it's really taking that system that was in the middle and going much more to an applications, services, and platforms model, where you have a set of services that live out on a network that have much more open interfaces. So web services becomes much more powerful. Web 2.0, thin client, right? So all of our desktops are now thin client. As we work with eGain and other partners, it allows us to much more tightly integrate and have a loosely coupled environment versus some of the brittleness that existed back 10 or 15 years ago. And so this whole notion of contact center as an enterprise service, right? Contact center that sits in a data center or a set of data centers or sits in a cloud, and then you as an end user or a customer get to tap into that service where you see fit, has become really powerful and really important. And this is where Cisco and eGain have done really well together in the market over the last couple of years. So if I move on to the partnership, again, Mike mentioned this before, going on 7 years now as a partner. Back in 2006, we actually had an email response and a web chat capability. We had it for a number of years, and we were selling it. We made a sort of a strategic decision at the time that said, there's so many things for us to invest in, and if you look at the landscape, this is probably an area that we want to partner with a market leader. And again, we had the good fortune of having a very open architecture because of where we came from, that we were able to make a decision and select eGain as a partner. Now, admittedly, all we really did back then is we OEM'd eGain email and chat. So we took what we had as our email and chat platforms and we sort of put it on the shelf and said, we're going to partner with eGain and OEM them. And we plugged it in as an option. For those that wanted email and chat, we were able to offer that capability. You can kind of see what happened over, it took us three or almost 4 years to get to 100 customers. But interestingly enough, what you've seen, and back to my point about market adoption, it only took us about less than 2 years to get the next 100 customers. So back in 2012, last year, we started looking and talking with eGain more, and we started seeing what customers were asking for. And as we were working with leading customers, they were asking for a lot more than voice, inbound and outbound, and IVRs, and email response, and web chat. They were asking for a much more holistic approach to customer engagement, which is why we started talking to eGain about sort of upping our partnership and doing something very different in the marketplace. So I'm going to come back to that in a minute. So again, just to give you some real clarity around this, if you think about what we were doing, we had 2 products. One was called EIM, or Email Interaction Manager. One was called WIM, or WIM, or Web Interaction Manager. And basically, these were just OEM products. So we integrated them into our framework, and we sold them as options. So if a customer wanted email response, we'd sell them EIM. If a customer wanted web chat or both, we'd sell them EIM and WIM. Notice that these are assisted service solutions, right? Interestingly enough, these fit the model of contact centers and interactions, but they required human intervention, right? It was almost the equivalent of an IVR, an interactive voice response opt-out, right? And in IVRs, you want to contain people as much as you can, unless you're trying to cross-sell, upsell. You're trying to contain to keep costs down. In a lot of ways, of course, hindsight's always 20/20. We think about this now and we say, boy, this wasn't that smart, right? It was good that we offered this, but these were assisted service solutions. So effectively, we were just asking customers to opt out and to give them some kind of service to have to respond to their email or respond to their web chat or a web callback. So again, very important, and we continue to offer these today because some customers want them. But as we look at the waves again, we would consider these sort of traditional multi-channel solutions. And again, I think based on where we're at today and what customers need and want, and what we've heard over the last 2 days, it's not sufficient. So under this Solutions Plus banner, which is the Cisco program for value-added reseller relationships, we signed a Solutions Plus, or a value-added reseller relationship with eGain back earlier this year and went to market, effectively selling eGain's entire platform. So obviously, as you guys know, this provides a much more comprehensive customer engagement platform across web, mobile, social, and again, with knowledge underneath it all. Critically important, because not only is knowledge important for all these digital channels, but knowledge is essential. And we have a lot of contact center customers that use knowledge today in the contact center. Knowledge is essential for all those times where you're opting out. So whether you're opting out through an email, whether you're opting out with a web chat, whether you're opting out of an IVR and saying I need to talk to an agent or a CSR, that knowledge framework lives underneath all of that. And as we heard all morning, the power of that is tremendous. And we saw it, and we see it, and our customers see it. And this is one of the biggest reasons why we shifted from this OEM relationship to this value-added relationship. So now we not only have these assisted service capabilities, but we have the power of all these self-service capabilities. Not only do we have it on the service side, but we have it on the power of the sales side, on all this offer optimization, cross-sell, upsell capabilities, all the things that we try to talk about when we talk about the voice channel gets now applied to all these digital channels. So really a powerful end-to-end solution with knowledge underneath it all that we think is really differentiated in the market. So this is the reason why we re-upped, and we're now going to market collectively. In the market, we sell together with eGain. So it's really important. Again, in the past, more OEM, we were sort of on our own. Now we've taken it the next step. And we believe, so far customers really like it. The pipeline's very strong, and we think, collectively we have a really powerful story. And the way we would look at this is customer engagement really lives in the experience wave. So this ability to deal with any channel, as well as face-to-face, inbound, outbound, sales and service with a common knowledge framework underneath it, really takes us from the world of transactions, interactions, to engagements. And again, it's not to suggest that if you're not thinking about the complete customer experience, you're doing wrong. These are continuous and cumulative waves. Everyone is on their own journey, right? It depends on your business and what you're trying to accomplish. But we would submit that we now have the ability, together with eGain, to help solve customer problems across all of these waves, depending on what they're trying to accomplish. So again, you go out, and I saw this morning, and I was talking to some of the folks last night on the Anderson story. I mean, really powerful stuff. I've seen some of the other stories around other customers. This whole notion of guided selling, guided service, tremendously powerful. Tremendously, to take out the human, in that equation. And again, sometimes I recognize, depending on your business and your vertical and what you're trying to accomplish, it's absolutely appropriate to have a live agent or a live CSR talk to a customer or a prospect. Absolutely appropriate. But the point is, we're not stuck doing that anymore. We can now really maximize all of these digital channels, and so it becomes your decision on how you want to treat your customers based on the segment. Right? So this notion of guidance, this notion of offer optimization, the ability to sell products, and with a knowledge base to know what products to offer up. Really powerful, and again, if appropriate, to be able to offer live assistance, right? Whether it's through web chat, web callback, et cetera. Really, really powerful. And then again, on the service side, co-browsing, obviously with eGain's announcement yesterday, this is going to be interesting to have a lot more customers tap into the notion of co-browse. And then, of course, the other key point, I think, is eGain's very focused on the cloud. The whole movement to cloud, I think, is really going to help with customer adoption around these things, because again, as I showed you before, the notion of the chaos that can be created, I think cloud presents an opportunity. I know we have one of our joint partners in the audience today, Cameo, which is just coming to market with a Cisco cloud powered offer. Really powerful, because customers will be able to try things a lot more easily, rather than have to invest 6 months and a lot of time and energy to try out something. That's the beauty of cloud, is you get to tap into something, try it out, see how it works, tune it, and then decide if you want to go cloud holistically, or if you want to bring it back on premise. So to sort of take it to the next step, why we think we're differentiated, right? So you got Cisco as a market leader in contact center infrastructure. In fact, really proud over the last 2 years to be #1 in the ability to execute dimension, which we think is critically important, particularly in a market that's so where you have a risk-averse buyer, you have a very powerful conduit front door to many customers' environments. So we've made a lot of headway. We have our contact center enterprise solution. We have our self-service and intelligent queuing platform, what we call Customer Voice Portal, which is integrated. We have integrated routing and reporting across the entire stack of voice, as well as the eGain digital channels. Really important. The term that we're using a lot at Cisco, and you're going to see a lot more from us, is around this omni-channel. And I know, buzzword bingo here, but there's a lot of focus on the power of video and visual. So you're going to see a lot from Cisco and eGain around, not only video chat, but kiosk-based video, mobile-based video. We're starting to do a lot of work with some early adopter customers around the power of, again, it's about, if I can sell high-value products. I mean, frankly, with what Amazon's done with Mayday, and now I don't know if you saw the announcement on Google, I think made an announcement either last night or this morning around their Hangouts, the ability to get remote expert support over video. This is another exploding area that we think is really, it's in its early stages, but we think it's really going to take off. It'll be somewhat parallel to what's happened with traditional digital channels around web and now mobile. If you add the power of web and mobile and social and knowledge right? And eGain's, market leadership around CRM, web customer self-service, and customer service. It's a really powerful combination. Very tightly, coupled and tightly integrated products, tightly coupled around the go-to-market, the service. We believe that we can really help in the market. We believe this is going to take us and take customers to the next sort of wave. So just to finish off, this new value-added reseller relationship allows us to, instead of OEM products only, allows us to take the market-leading products in their vast categories, have them integrated, independent lab verification, universal queuing for those that want that, integrated reporting, which is tremendously powerful to limit the seams, limit the fragmentation and the disconnects in the journeys. We have the ability through our joint partners to have partner implementation, certified partners, as well as eGain and Cisco doing it, and support from product experts. So we're kind of taking what was traditionally considered best of breed and trying to make best of breed much easier and more palatable than it's historically been in the past by doing a lot of the legwork up front and having us work together to help out you all in the marketplace.